Thanks so much for coming out, everyone. I have an ask of the elected officials currently in attendance. I know we don't have all of them here, but I'm going to recognize all of them anyway. If you are an elected official, please stand. So I very purposely said that right as Ted was chomping on a big bite of food there, putting that food down like a champ. So I just wanted to recognize our elected officials. Sheriff Paul Fitzgerald, who is running for re-election this cycle. County Attorney Tim Meals. County Auditor Lucy Martin, who's running for re-election as well. County Supervisor Linda Merkin. County Supervisor Lisa Heddens. County Supervisor Latifah Faisal, who is running for re-election as well. I don't know if I saw Latifah. I don't know if Latifah's here. Latifah's out of town. Where's Herman? Where's the Hermanator? Senator Herman Kornbach. I'm sorry, Herman. Herman forbade me from calling him the Hermanator, but I've got the mic right now, and whew. Representative Ross Wilburn. I don't know if Ross made it today, but he is running for re-election as well. Also, Rep. Beth Wessel-Crochet. I saw Beth earlier today. Is Beth here? Not here today. Okay, so we saw her earlier today at Cindy's event, which was a lovely event, Cindy. And I know Selden's not here. Soil and Water Commissioner Selden Spencer. Also, I wanted to acknowledge the new candidates, and I don't know if Mike Wolf or Ryan Condon made it. I don't think I've seen them. But Mike Wolf running for Senate District 26. Ryan Condon running for House District 51. Penny Vossler, which I know Penny's not in town, running for HD 48. And then our two main event speakers today, Margaret Liston running for Senate District 24, and Cynthia Paschen running for Senate District 28. Let's give them a hand, everybody. And I'm Ryan Melton running for U.S. House, but on chopped liver, whatever, you know. Anyway. All right, so I am very, very excited to have the opportunity to introduce our first speaker. And I imagine most of you in this room probably know who this fine gentleman is, but Chris Jones is here today, author of Swine Republic, which every day I look at my Facebook news feed, it's won another award, Chris, so congratulations on that. Retired hydrology research engineer from University of Iowa. And just a very quick personal story. I've been very gracious to Chris for spending time chatting with me on water quality issues and numerous issues across the state. He's obviously a very busy man, so I'm grateful for the time that you've spent to chat with me and help educate me on a lot of these issues. But I don't want to take any more of Chris's time. Chris, come on up. Thank you, sir.
Well, thanks for the invitation to come today. I appreciate it, and my Saturdays have been kind of full last week. I drove from Iowa City to Burlington and did a program, and then I drove from Burlington to Highlandville, Iowa, which, if you know where that is, it's as far northeast as you could go, and I was just exhausted at the end of the day, and that was outside, and I just spoke contemporaneously, and so that's what I'm going to do today also. And I'll try to leave a few minutes for questions, because it seems like everywhere I go, people have questions about Iowa water and agriculture, and so I think it's important that people get to talk with me about that and get their questions answered. And so a little bit about me. My folks are both from Knoxville, Iowa, which is Marion County, and I was not born in Iowa. I was born in Monmouth, Illinois, right across the river from Burlington when my dad worked over there for the railroad. They moved back to Iowa not long after I was born, and I grew up in Ankeny, and my folks bought a house there sight unseen in 1967 for $18,000, and there were 6,000 people there. And of course, who would have ever thought that Ankeny would be bigger than Ames, right? But here we are. But anyway, I worked in Minnesota for a long time in the commercial testing business, and then did consulting work for water and wastewater utilities for about 5 years up there before coming back, taking a job at the Des Moines Water Works, where I worked for 8 years. Worked for 4 years at the Iowa Soybean Association, and people kind of, tilt their head at that, but I'm so glad I did work there because I learned so much about farming and the culture of farming especially, which has really informed my writing. And then in 2015, I was sort of invited to come over to the University of Iowa and work at the hydraulics lab there, and I managed the state's network of water quality sensors and did research of my own and worked with some of my colleagues, Larry Weber, you might have heard of, Keith Schilling, the state geologist, and some other people. And when I got to the University of Iowa, they said, do you want a website? And I said, sure. And so a woman helped me set it up, and I had done a lot of writing in my other jobs. And so I intended to set up a page where I would populate it with essays to communicate to the public about the work that we were doing. And that I did. And so at the time I felt it was important that we try to communicate with general audiences about the things that we were doing. And I've come to really feel since then that academia has largely given up trying to communicate with the public. They've absolved themselves of any responsibility for doing that. And so I think that's been a terrible thing that's happened, and I think it's contributed to a lot of our researchers being siloed in their own thing. And we forget who's paying the bills and who we're working for, and especially on these issues related to water. I mean, these are issues that everyday people are interested in. And so I populated my website there with these essays, and the first few years nobody read them. And so I would look at the analytics on something 2 or 3 years after I posted it, and maybe 3 people had read it. Then I wrote this one called "This Is What Happened," and I got done with it, and I thought, this is pretty good. And so I sent it to about 200 people in my address book and got some good feedback on it. And, it was just the tiniest bit provocative, okay? Just the tiniest bit. And I really didn't get any pushback. And so each one after that, I sort of, increased the hotness of it, I guess you would say. And finally, towards the end there, they were too hot, and a couple guys at the legislature didn't like it and asked the university lobbyists to do something about me. And so at that time, I just decided it would be easier to retire, which I did. And so the essays, many of the essays in my book, The Swine Republic, are from those days of writing blogs for my university website. I wrote some new stuff for the book, and I continue to write on my Substack, which is riverraccoon.substack.com. And if you want to read that stuff, if you just Google my name and Substack, I think there's 2 Chris Joneses on Substack, so you'll be able to pick it out pretty easily. The book was recently selected as Iowa's representative for the National Book Festival in August that the Library of Congress hosts, and so there will be another edition of the book printed, and so that's good. And so I do intend to write another book or books, but I just have not been able to find the time to do it here the last year because I've just been so busy traveling around. And so I'm in this group called the Iowa Writers Collaborative, and the other members are looking for tips on how they can grow their Substack. And I said the best tip I can give you is to have a couple morons from the legislature try to get you fired, and the subscribers will just pour in. So anyway, so we know these things are political, right? And I voted for one Republican in my life, and so I probably won't ever vote for another one, but I just have to say I'm really disappointed, to say the least, in the Democratic Party and how they've addressed these issues of water quality and environment in Iowa. And so since 1932, the Democratic Party has positioned itself as the party of the middle class, right? And so what the middle class is exactly has undergone redefinitions over the years. And so, you know, it's come to include people of color and LGBTQ and you know, other folks, Jews, and so the Democratic Party has tried to expand the definition of middle class, you know, as an electoral strategy. And so, you know, what are middle class issues? And so I would say in this day and age for Iowans, having clean water is a middle class issue, right? Definitely is. And so why do our representatives not run on this? I just don't get it, because it polls so high. And I was telling somebody a few minutes ago, I live in probably the most Democratic Senate district in the state of Iowa. Zach Walls is my representation in the Senate. I probably live in the second or third most Democratic House district. Amy Nielsen is my representative in the House. And look at who's contributing to their campaigns. It's the Agribusiness Association of Iowa, it's the Iowa Corn Growers, it's the Iowa Renewable Fuel Association, it's Western Iowa Energy, you know, on and on and on. And, you know, here's the thing. Look, people that want clean water, they're not contributing to these campaigns. And so, as a result, I think our representatives leave it behind. And it's very disturbing to me. And it's disturbing to me that when I see Democrats running, you know, we need to do better in rural areas, right? We hear that all the time. Well, automatically we equate rural with farmer. And, well, look, that's not the way it is. Travel around small town Iowa and go to these small towns, and you see a small town that's crumbling oftentimes, and then on the outskirts of town you see where the farmers live, and they look like houses in Ankeny, right? And so I think we have this landed gentry here in Iowa that our Democratic politicians are catering to. And it really is disturbing to me. It's disturbing to me, and it's disappointing to me, and I don't know how we break out of this. And people think, you know, I have the answers. No, I'm just some guy that, you know, wrote a book, and so I don't have the answers on how to fix this. But I'm a big fan of Howard Zinn's books, and, you know, one thing he says in there is, you know, if you want change, you can't just walk into the voting booth and check the right box and expect change to happen, right? Change has to happen at the grassroots level, and so we need to demand things change. And obviously right now I think the legislature is kind of a non-starter on these things, and so what can you do? And I like to tell this story about the Grange, and I don't know how many people have heard of the Grange, but it was organized at the turn of the last century because farmers were really fed up with the railroads having a monopoly on grain movement. And so they agitated for what they wanted, which part of that was navigation on the upper Mississippi River to get the grain out of the Corn Belt. And so a lot of times it didn't pay for them to agitate with people in Congress and in Washington, D.C. And so the national Grange gave the local Granges great latitude to do whatever they want and to pick the path they wanted and do the sorts of things that they thought would work at the local level. And so the Grange, they would agitate at county supervisor meetings and city council meetings and any sort of local meeting of government authorities and agitate for what they wanted. And so that's what I think we need now. We need a Grange for water quality. And we need people agitating at the local level. And so if you think these cities aren't complicit with all this pollution, you're wrong. They are. And so look at a city like Cedar Rapids. Well, what's there? ADM, Cargill, Pepsi, and so forth. And, you know, the city sees those as good jobs, and they're very reluctant to upset the apple cart in terms of agribusiness. And so as a consequence, they're really on board with stuff that Mike Negg is doing, for example, with this batch and build stuff around the state, which to my mind is just a huge waste of money. And so we need to agitate with the cities, the city councils. We have 3,000 drainage districts in Iowa, and I don't know if you know what that is, but they oversee the drainage tile infrastructure that lowers the water table over the northern part of the state. There's 3,000 of these drainage districts. Well, who oversees the drainage infrastructure in Iowa? It's the county supervisors. And so when the county supervisors are making decisions about drainage tile and the county tile mains and so forth, people need to be at those meetings and say, look, how is this going to affect the water quality in, you know, the creek in the northwest part of the county or whatever it is. And so this is what we need to do to affect change, I think. You know, as I said, I think the legislature is a non-starter now, and I wish, I've said this to people, I think job one here, I mean, sometimes it seems so hopeless, right? It's hopeless. But job one here is to convert Democrats to, you know, the right positions on this. And, you know, how do we do that? And I think, again, we have to agitate, we have to demand, and we have to create expectations for our elected officials. And so, as I finish up here before I open it up to questions, one of the things I want to emphasize is if things are going to get better here with water quality, ethanol has to die, okay? It has to die. We have 11,000 square miles of our state that are used to grow corn for ethanol, okay? That's an area the size of 20 counties. And so when you look at the price of land here in Iowa, it has increased in lockstep with the amount of ethanol that this country has produced. And so consequently now, we have farmland, not unusual to sell for $20,000 an acre, right? Not unusual at all. And so we have a lot of young people that want to farm, but they can't farm because they can't get into it because the price of land is so high. And then when we have heirs that inherit land, and there might be, you know, 3, 4, 5 siblings, and they can't agree on how the land should be managed, and so they end up selling it for the highest price, which of course is that's going to be for a farmer that wants to grow corn and soybeans. And so I don't like saying this because it makes you sound like Nikita Khrushchev, but we need land reform, right? And we cannot get land reform as long as ethanol keeps our land in this prison where it costs so much and it prevents change on the landscape, right? And so we need young people to farm. The average age of an Iowa farmer is 60 years old. Well, that's not exactly a demographic that's real receptive to change, right? And so young people, they want to farm. A lot of them want to do something different. We need land reform. So what can we do? Well, if we want to make laws about conservation, one of the places we could start is rented land. You know, why not require cover crops on all rented land, right? Presumably that doesn't pinch the farmer operator, it pinches the landowner. Or we do other things that make the owner of the land responsible for the pollution. When you do that, presumably you increase the cost to farm that land, and then it makes it less of a desirable investment, right? And perhaps you can get people to divest their land. And so we have a lot of people sitting in offices in Minneapolis and Chicago and Des Moines and Omaha that own farmland, right? How can we get them to divest that land in ways that would produce different sorts of production systems, right? And so again, I want to emphasize, we need to get rid of ethanol. We've got, you know, we saw a law passed here a couple of years ago. We have to have E15 at every gas station in Iowa, right? Well, we know oats, for example, produces much more desirable outcomes than corn and soybean. We've got the world's largest oat processing facility in Iowa, in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They won't buy any oats. They won't buy any Iowa oats. They buy all their oats from Canada. Well, if we can make a law that requires E15 ethanol at every gas station in Iowa, why can't we create, you know, a framework where farmers can grow oats and send them to the largest oat production facility in the world? You know, these are the things that our legislators need to be thinking about and doing. And so I'll just finish with that. I thank everybody for reading my book and reading my Substack. If you don't want to buy it, I think the Ames Library has it. I think it's long enough now that it might be in some little libraries. When I go on walks in Iowa City with my girlfriend, I stop at every little library, and she says, "Is it in there?" And I said, "No, it's not in there." So it must somebody must still want to buy it. And so I want to give you an opportunity to ask me questions, and please do. And if I think I can hear you, I'll repeat the question and then answer it. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, so with the current federal threshold for nitrate in water at 10 milligrams per liter, and we know why that was set, Lou syndrome, right? David Swearney, obviously a giant in water quality in the state too, was on Iowa Press with the CEO of Inland Waterworks, I think, last fall. And they were talking about what it would look like to lower that federal threshold. Let's say, for example, a law was passed that lowered that federal threshold from 10 milligrams per liter to 5. What would that look like as far as scale, as far as cost? Is that even possible?
So that's a good question. And so about 1 million people in Iowa drink water above 5 part per million nitrate. And so we've known for a long, long time, in some cases almost 25 years, that drinking water with that amount of nitrate in it is a risk to adult human health. And so what would it look like? Well, Des Moines would be obviously the biggest one affected, and Des Moines can go years having their finished drinking water above 5. So it would be a seismic thing for sure, right? But, you know, look, I think it's a disgrace that we have to have the quote-unquote bodies on the curb before we get change. And so everybody wants to look at these human health effects, and I think it's terrible. But nonetheless, the reality is the human health effect is what would drive change. I think lowering the drinking water standard needs to be done. I think it needs to be done. I think it would be good. I think it could force some change. And the other thing to remember is if you're a small town, if you're Des Moines, right, you can absorb that cost, right? They have 600,000 customers. They can absorb that cost. If you're a small town in rural Iowa, 2,000 people, and your well is above 5, and you need to drill a new well or build a new treatment plant or build a treatment plant, that's a burden for a town of 2,000 people, right? And so I think this could drive change, lowering the standard. Yes, ma'am. Right here. Yep.
Okay. So you were mentioning the land and young farmers, okay? So maybe Herman can answer this. There was a bill, maybe it passed, maybe I can't remember, about the Republicans want to not allow private entities or even farmers to take land out of production, and in their words, probably, it would deter young farmers from taking it up, which is BS.
So much of our land is privately held. 97% of the land in Iowa is privately held now. And so nibbling at the edges on people that want to donate land or convert it to natural condition is such baloney. I just don't see how that's going to affect land rents or land ownership. And so we need really large policy change to affect this. right? And so this idea that taking land out of production, Farm Bureau supports that. Well, you want to know why they support it? Because on land that's in a natural condition, you don't sell seed there. You don't sell chemical there. You don't sell machinery there. You don't sell insurance there. You don't sell grain drying and grain transport and all these other things. And so a lot of that, I think, tells you that how much they're on the edge. They need every possible acre to be farmed, right? And so we need land to go into more natural condition, and I always mention this when I give my programs. All of our state parks in Iowa, all of them in aggregate, would fit inside the city limits of the city of Des Moines. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful how we've been robbed of the opportunity to enjoy nature. Back, right behind, yeah, yes. Yeah.
You said earlier how a lot of the legislators, why they're not getting it. Is it because they're misinformed, or they refuse to learn and believe the science?
So I think there are a lot of legislators that are uninformed about the science of this. I think that's a problem, but I think, look, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And the squeaky wheel in Iowa is agriculture. And so I think that's the main issue. But yes, there is a problem with ignorance. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I wanted to go back to the nitrate law. Was there any money in the Federal Infrastructure Act that could be devoted to that?
Well, I think the horse has probably left the barn on that. I think the Biden administration, in terms of drinking water, they've done a good job focusing on lead. And so we've heard a lot of, especially Flint, Michigan, we heard the issue with lead. There's water systems in Iowa that have issues with lead. A lot of people scoff at this, where we're going to go in and we're going to replace all the lead pipes in a town, even if the town isn't out of compliance for lead. I tend to think it's a good idea to get rid of these lead pipes, because you know, those pipes are going to be there in some cases for maybe another century, and you don't know how the quality of the water at the treatment plant, the people at the treatment plant, are they doing things correctly? You know, how the water is treated is what makes whether or not the water leaches lead out of the pipes. And so the competency of the water treatment, the utility, it might not always be the same, right? And so I think it's a good idea to get rid of these lead pipes. I can't see them addressing nitrate issues right now with the ARPA and the Inflation Reduction Act.
Hello. I'm a Story County supervisor, so I have the privilege of serving on a couple of the types of organizations you've talked about. First of all, I chair a WMA and serve on some other ones. And secondly, I have the pleasure of serving as a drainage district trustee for a whole lot of drainage districts, because nobody elects drainage district trustees, so it comes to the supervisors. I'm concerned about what the Republican legislature has done to strip control from local government. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to give you just the first example of something that happened. When I was, I'm in my second term as a supervisor. During my first term, we adopted an ordinance that said everybody out in the unincorporated area, and Herman's looking at me, has to clean out their septic tank every 5 years. The Farm Bureau then talked to a legislator who basically got a law passed that said, oh yeah, they can pass a law like that, but they can't enforce it. There's no fine to it. So we have a voluntary ordinance for something that is a water quality issue. WMAs, they tried to take more authority away from WMAs. We're not funded, but they're trying to tell us what we can and cannot do. And drainage district law is way over 100 years old and doesn't allow us to do a lot of the things that we should be doing for water quality. I'm very frustrated.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
So on the WMAs, this was largely a Democratic idea. I think in 2010 was when the legislation was passed creating the WMAs. And this, I think, was an olive branch from the left, if you will, from the NGOs and environmentalists, that they were willing to play nice with the farmers, right? And not push regulation. And we would use these WMAs to approach these voluntary, or to address, or to do this through a voluntary approach. And of course, the legislature, from what I can tell, just handed the WMAs over to Mike Nigg. And this is why I say it's time to stop playing nice. They're just going to take these things and twist them to their own devices. The whole batch and build thing, that was John Norwood's idea, right? And Mike Nigg has taken it and just, taken it and turned it into a money laundering thing from what I can see. And so, look, we have to demand that if they're not willing to transition the system to a more environmentally sound production system, then we have to demand the right to say how the existing system is operated, because we're indemnifying it. And the way we get a say is through laws. Now, I get that the legislature is not going to pass any laws right now to regulate agriculture, but we need to make them defend the indefensible, right? We need to make them defend the indefensible. And so I was really happy to see the last session, the legislature, there was a bill introduced to buffer all the streams, all the perennial streams like in Minnesota. You got to make these people say, oh, no, stream buffering, nah, we can't do that. We have to make them defend the indefensible. As far as the drainage districts, I can't remember exactly what your question was, but anyway, the drainage districts are in Iowa code. It goes back 1903, I think, was code for the drainage districts. The Iowa code says that draining the land is a greater good, right? It says that in Iowa code. Well, now we know it's not, and so anyway.
But we have to do that. As drainage district trustees, we have to enforce that law. We have to follow it.
I got nothing, I guess. It doesn't matter, wherever you want to go.
I think we've got time for 2 more questions to stay on track.
Okay. Hi, thank you so much for coming. So, as you've been talking, I've been rolling, I'm a political science professor. I've been rolling and rolling around in my head the question of how do you build a coalition to do this? And how do you muster the political will to do this? One of the possibilities would be not to take farmland totally out of agricultural production, but instead move it into less nitrate heavy crops. So thinking particularly about the renewable fuel standard. The renewable fuel standard has a requirement for mixing of advanced and cellulosic biofuels, which has never really been implemented because basically R&D gave up on it, kind of, and the EPA has punted on it. It hasn't happened. And the attempts that were made were really dependent mostly on corn, which turns out probably not to be the best fuel for advanced and cellulosic biofuels. Whereas Brazil has actually managed to make its cellulosic biofuel industry work using crops other than corn. I'm wondering, do you see any possibility? I mean, it strikes me that moving farmland into a different agricultural use might be easier to get people to agree to than to move it into, I don't know, solar panels or or whatever. Do you think that that would address water quality issues? And do you, I mean, I'm just curious, do you hear your thoughts on all of this?
So 60% of our corn goes to produce ethanol. So if we were growing something else, corn is our most polluting crop. And so if we went to something else, obviously, yes, it would improve water quality. Now, what is the something else? And so we know, for example, that a cattle can graze, you know, amongst solar panels. There are systems that do that. And so, but a lot of guys, when you're 60 years old, you don't want cattle, okay? That's just the fact. And so the demographics of farming really links up with a lot of this. And I say all the time, we created this behemoth of an ethanol industry, right? Through public policy. Ethanol exists for one reason and one reason only: public policy. If we can create this behemoth of an ethanol industry through policy, we ought to be able to create things like cattle grazing amongst solar panels in southern Iowa, where the land isn't very good for growing corn in the first place. And so, yes, we need to talk about these things.
To follow up on that, what hope do you see in regenerative agriculture really moving some efforts to subsidize and support farm-to-table types of smaller farms where we would build a base of farmers who are really doing things in terms of preserving land? I think there's a big myth that we feed the world and we have to have everything in production in monocrop. But as you say, much of it goes for ethanol, a large share, most of the rest goes for food additives and high fructose syrup and feed to cattle, none of which are very healthy in the way of feeding us in the way that we should be fed. So what can government do to try to change the dynamics? Because all of our subsidies really do, or most of them go to monocrop maximizing extractive agriculture that depletes our land and causes this problem. And almost nothing goes toward alternative, regenerative, and food to market, which really I think hopes for kind of a smallest, beautiful, better economy.
So regenerative agriculture, people ask me, why don't you talk about this more? It is a good idea, but look at the way Iowa land is farmed. We have about 80,000 people that farm, but probably on the order of 40,000 of them, maybe even less than that, control the vast majority of the land. And so we have farmers, not unusual now, farming 4,000 acres, 8,000 acres, 10,000 acres. Because corn and soybean, GMO, it's easy, right? You can work 8 weeks out of the year and make, you know, a lot of money farming corn and soybean. These sorts of farmers are not going to do regenerative agriculture. They're not going to do it because it takes time. And so as soon as you introduce diversity to a farm, you also introduce the amount of time it takes to work that farm. And so that's not going to happen. I don't think regenerative agriculture is...
about new farmers who would like to get into the business, and they don't have the same type of subsidy and support structure that people who farm 4,000 acres have in terms of yeah. System. So it's really converting our incentive.
So here's the thing. Once you make the producer on that land responsible for the pollution, you put that person in a different decision-making framework. And so all of a sudden, if you're regulating the amount of nitrate in their tile, they might think, geez, maybe it's not a good idea to grow corn on this piece of ground year after year after year. Maybe I should grow oats. Or maybe I should sell it because I can't farm this much land when I'm responsible for the pollution. And so to get farmers into these different production systems, I think we need to make them responsible for the pollution. Why do we have all these CAFOs, right? Why do we have it? It's not an accident that we have all these CAFOs. We don't make them responsible for the pollution, right? And so our policies have created what we see out here. And so, yes, we need policies that will help us create a new production system or new production systems. But I think, you know, to toss this regenerative agriculture in the lap of the ag establishment and say, here, take this and do it and we'll get better water quality, that ain't gonna happen. Believe me, that is not gonna happen.
One more question, guys.
I have the mic, I win.
Yeah.
Okay. So real quick, I just think it's amazing to me as a scientist that Iowa has an aversion to data in terms of this stuff. And if you have the data on what's happening in terms of water quality everywhere, that would force people to maybe make some of those decisions. I mean, am I off track there? Or?
So, look, Des Moines has been removing nitrate down there at Fleur Drive since 1992, okay? That is, what is it, 32 years ago, almost 2 generations. So they've had the data down there for 32 years, and, you know, our elected leaders won't act on it. And so I think the idea that data, it certainly arms the citizen. Right? When you're out there agitating for change, you know, you can't just say, I want better water. You have to be able to say, look, the water in Squaw Creek, or excuse me, in Iowa Creek is 15 milligrams per liter nitrate. We need to do something about that, right? We need to do something about it. And so I think the data is very valuable for average people. They can come armed with that when they talk to elected people.
Thank you so much, Chris. Oh, one more.
I'll make one quick point. Well, I came from farming, like literally 2 hours ago I was running a field culture on a 4-wheel drive tractor, and I would like to begin farming. The 4-wheel drive tractor I was driving was 22 years old. To buy one of those at the sale and the condition it's in would be over $80,000. The tractor my dad was planting with, he bought, it's about 32 years old. He had to spend $55,000 on it. He was lucky he bought it 5 years ago before the pandemic. The planter that he runs is about 24 years old. He's only got about 4 or 5 years left with that. To replace that, new planters. Just plant corn is about $90,000. What Chris said is a depressing fact that Iowa has turned into a landed gentry, like he said, and through the tool of the Farm Bureau, the incredibly rich farmers that have built up $4,000 to $8,000 worth of land are becoming a less and less number, but a more impactful group in Iowa. And the most depressing thing he said is, my dad loves doing it because his only hobby is literally driving a tractor. We raise rye every year, we raise oats every year. We raise hay every year. He makes money on that, but it's a hell of a lot of work. And every year when we combine the oats, no place in Iowa will buy them, other than other farmers who want to feed them. None of the co-ops will take them. As you said, Quaker Oats won't accept a delivery of oats from Iowa. The rye, I don't know how many of you guys drive around the county. A lot of farmers have started planting rye as cover crop, but then they plant their beans into it and spray it with Roundup and kill it. So that rye is literally just there to try to get a little wind erosion away and prevent new weeds from coming up before they plant their beans. So it is going to take some real policy changes, and I thank Chris for coming today, but it's not a little problem. And the market for these alternative crops isn't there. And to break into the market as younger farmers, it's going to be incredibly hard. And as he mentioned, the landed gentry want to only let kids of farmers into their club. So it's a tough problem we have in Iowa, but you look at how many legislators go to every Farm Bureau meeting, and that's the one group they listen to. So thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Chris. If I were betting on which speaker.
Muted, Mike's out.
Oh. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. If I were to take a bet on which speaker would be the hardest to move forward to the next one, it'd be Chris, because obviously he speaks a lot of very powerful truths, and I'd encourage you to reach out to him on social media. He's a great follow if you do Twitter, or I know it's called X now, but I refuse to call it X. But before I move on, I have a few announcements to make before we go to our next speaker. I think in the context of what Chris spoke about, I just have a quick question for you guys. What % of Iowa's food that we consume is imported? 90%. I think if you have a 90% food import rate in a state like ours with soils as rich as ours, that's a problem. That's a problem. All right. So I have a couple announcements to make on Maddie's request before we bring up Lucy for the hat pass. So number one, so on February 7th, Otto Faubourg died. He was a lifelong Iowan educator and Democratic activist. Thank you to Otto and his family and friends who have made significant donations to the Story County Democrats in his memory. His son sent us this message, his son Rhett. Dad raised an extended family of passionate Democrats. He would be pleased to see this money go into a cause that meant so much to him. So definitely want to thank Otto's family for those contributions and for those efforts, and obviously thank Otto for all of the sacrifices and contributions he made over the years. Yes. My final announcement before we move to the hat pass, also a memorial service will be held for Curtis and Melinda Bauer on Sunday, May 26th. This is next Sunday at 2 p.m. at Ames United Church of Christ. So that's Sunday, May 26th at 2 p.m. at Ames United Church of Christ. Curtis died December 23rd, 2022. 1 week after his 99th birthday, and Melinda died June 11th, 2021. A light lunch and fellowship will follow the service. In lieu of flowers, memorial contributions may be made in Curtis's and Melinda's names to their favorite charitable organization, the Bridge Home, formerly known as the Emergency Residence Project. Thank you, everybody. Yes, so the memorial service, Sunday, May 26th, that's next Sunday, a week from tomorrow, yep, 2 p.m. at the Ames United Church of Christ. And again, in lieu of flowers, memorial contributions may be made in Curtis's and Melinda's names to their favorite charitable organization, the Bridge Home, formerly known as Emergency Residence Project. Okay, thank you, everybody. All right, next up, Lucy will take over for the hat pass for 5. Thank you, Lucy. Appreciate you.
Yeah, this is the hat pass. I thought it was the hat dance, so I'm not really prepared. That joke goes out to Nancy France. Thank you, Nancy. I didn't wear the right shoes. As usual, we ask that you dig into your pockets. I know a lot of you have already contributed, but and help us out here. This goes to the Story County Dems. As a long-time serving election official who also runs for office during the presidential cycle, I know how helpful this is to all of the candidates, especially me, who doesn't necessarily get to do as much door knocking or get out there as much because I'm often tasked with election duties while I'm running for office. But we have a lot on our plate, but the party does a lot for us in terms of organizing things like photo shoots and advertising and working together to get our faces and names out there, mailings, and I really appreciate everything that the local party does. Certainly running for countywide office without the party would be, I think, a a burden that I could not lift by myself. So I, for one, am extremely grateful for it. I think the rest of us are. That's why they have us pass the really, I think, dollar store baskets, but maybe we should get some hats sometimes. I don't know. But it does go a long way. Every dollar you throw in there is certainly helpful. And for people like Margaret and Cindy that are running, anything we could do to support them. Right now I don't have an opponent, so August 28th is the last date I could pick one up, so I'll keep that in my back pocket. But I'm hoping for a pretty easy run for myself. How many of you know that we are actually right in the middle of an election right now? Any? Raise your hands. Okay. That's good. June 4th is the primary. It'll be pretty quiet on our side. Nobody's contested, but it's good to practice those election muscles. Come out to your polling place either on June 4th. You could come to my office in Nevada during the hours of 8 and 4:30, Monday through Friday. You want to bring me a coffee or a smile, lunch, that works too. Monday at 5 p.m. is the last, that's the deadline to request a mailed absentee ballot. So if you usually get a ballot by mail and you haven't requested one yet, please come to my office on Monday and we'll get you hooked up. Or if you're there already, you could just cast a ballot in the office. So that is an option. Generally speaking, primary election's pretty sleepy affair in Story County. But we have a lot of great candidates, so come out and vote, talk to your neighbors about that, and hopefully we don't get a tornado on a primary day or a flood. Those are the two things I worry about the most. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I think the tornado or flood pitch is an early voting pitch. At least that's what I got from the... All right, next up, Cynthia Paschen, running for State Senate. Come on up, Cindy.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. My name is Cynthia Paschen. I'm running for the Iowa Senate, District 28. I want to give a quick shout out to my husband, John, who is on his way home from Zimbabwe. He's doing his 12th volunteer trip with Operation of Hope, repairing cleft lip and palate on children. So it's been a little quiet at my house. I'm used to my husband doing the laundry and figuring out what's for supper and, you know, asking me how my day was. So it's been quiet. So I'm really looking forward to getting John home. I don't know how many of you are familiar with District 28, but it's a big one. It's part of Story County, all of Story City and Roland, all of Hamilton, Hancock, Humboldt, Franklin, and Wright. So it goes almost up to Clear Lake, and it's shaped like a cross. So I'm running against 12-year veteran Republican Dennis Guth from Clemmy. And it's been interesting to meet with folks that grew up with Senator Guth. I had an opportunity to go to Belmont, to the Sugar Pie Bakery. It's one of the cutest places you could ever visit. It's kind of like Bob's Burgers. The mom and the dad and the two kids live above the bakery. And it's just darling. And Belmont has two coffee houses. One is Sugar Pie Bakery, and then they're owned by Democrats. And then the other coffee house is owned by Republicans. And so people in town of Belmont, tiny little town, decide which one they align with, and that's the coffee shop that they go to, and they avoid arguments. So it's very civilized. But I was in Belmont at the invitation of the Hancock and the Franklin County Dems, who are not nearly as powerful as the Story County Dems. but that they are excited to have a candidate. And one of the guys asked me that day, there was probably 24 people sitting around this big table in the bakery, and he said, what are your 3 priorities? And I said, well, I want to give rural Iowans a seat at the table. And they all told me stories about how they had emailed Senator Guth and tried to call him about the AEAs, and he hadn't answered their phone calls, he hadn't answered their emails. And they said, you know, that guy was an asshole in high school and he's still an asshole. So they know him well. And they know that he doesn't respond when they've got concerns. He doesn't listen. So I said, my second priority obviously is public schools and AEAs, restoring their funding. And my third priority is safe, legal abortion. And they all got their wallets out and started shoving $20 at me. These rural Iowans who are supposedly so conservative and so afraid to talk about water quality and abortion, well, they're sick of being nice, they're sick of being afraid, and they're ready to win. So, thank you very much for being here.
So I'm actually going to be able to vote for you because you represent Webster City, right? So I am moving to Webster City, actually. So it'll be cool to give you that support. That's awesome. All right. So next up, where's Margaret at? Margaret, hi there, Margaret. I always know where Margaret Liston is, and I couldn't see. I'm like, oh my gosh, where's Margaret Liston? Oh no. Everyone, please welcome my dear friend Margaret Liston.
Thank you so much, Story County Democrats, for having this event today. Yes, I'm Margaret Liston, and I am running for Senate 24. My district is a little bit of Southwest Story, Boone County, Greene County, Guthrie, some of Dallas County, Perry, Minburn. So that is my area. It's kind of an L-shaped. So a little bit about myself before I tell you why I'm running for the Senate. I grew up in the small town of Beaver, Iowa, second youngest of 7 children. Together, my husband and I have 6 adult children and 10 grandchildren. I am a retired operating room nurse. I had my career here of 31 and a half years at Mary Greeley Medical Center. And it was an awesome career. I loved it. And I'm a longtime councilwoman for the city of Ogden. Throughout my life, I've had a passion for working for others and improving my community. I've been particularly invested in the betterment and the health of our community. Serving the people of Ogden is very rewarding. It gives me the opportunity to hear their concerns and how they feel needs addressed. Honesty, accountability, and responsiveness. This is the representation all Iowans deserve. Unfortunately, over the past few years, our current legislators and governor have developed laws and regulations that favor small interest groups aimed at taking away our rights and our land. They don't represent you. Iowans deserve real representation, and that's why I'm running for the Iowa Senate. Sorry. Iowans are intelligent enough to make their own medical choices. Iowans are intelligent enough to know it's wrong for the government to steal farmland for profit for private corporations. And Iowans are intelligent and responsible enough to determine themselves what books their children can read and to know it. In the 5th grade, my school closed, and we consolidated with Ogden. Do you know what happens when your school closes? It does. I can speak from experience. You lose your school, your town dies. So what happened to Beaver after our school closed? The population today is less than half that it was then. So are we going to let that happen? Taking public tax dollars to fund private schools is wrong. Because of these reasons, I'm running for the Iowa Senate. You deserve more. You deserve better. You deserve representation that is accountable, transparent, and responsive to meet your needs, not those of small interest groups. Iowa deserves better, period. I will work for you, and together we can bring more accountability, opportunity, and freedom back to Iowa. I cannot do it alone. I ask all of you to volunteer to either write postcards, make phone calls, door knock, and of course, donate. I know your time is valuable. If you have concerns, please come talk to me or contact me at Liston for Iowa. I want to thank you for your time and thank you for your vote.
Thank you, Margaret. Well, I will wrap us up. Before I forget, Maddie, I can feel the pressure of Maddie from Colorado right now. Leave everything on the table. Our volunteers will get it for you. And once we depart, please drive safely. And again, thank you so much to all of you for coming. Thank you for the amazing questions you asked, Chris. I thought that was fantastic. Thank you to all the volunteers, and thank you again to the church for hosting. So I'll just wrap us up with a few final thoughts here. So I was at, I'm not going to name any names. Some people will want me to, I'm not going to. I was at a party event a few weeks back. And at the event, there was a conversation around platform versus electability. And I think what we've heard from our candidates today, it really makes this a very relevant conversation to have in this room right now. So what I mean by that is this. So there were, and I'm not going to name names, there was a faction, let's say, and we're a big tent party, right? And so as a big tent party, we're going to disagree on some things, and that's okay. We should be respectful, we should be civil, because all of us have the same basic goals in mind. We're the party of human rights. We're the party of those who are struggling the most. And there is going to be disagreement on how we get to the final goal of taking care of our people, of driving equity and opportunity in our communities. So very loving, very brilliant people can disagree on that goal, or on the action to get to the goal. So in this room, there are two factions, right? There is one faction that said, we need to be careful. We need to be careful as Democrats in how we present our worldviews. Because if we ruffle too many feathers, we're going to piss some people off. Now, there was another faction represented by someone in the back of the room, and she yelled the words, "We have a platform." What that really means to me is we have values. We have values. Now, the back and forth crosstalk went as such. The careful side said, we have to win elections first, and then we can implement the platform planks. The platform side kind of went quiet, so I felt when it was my time to speak that I would speak up for the platform team. Respectfully, civilly, we're a big tent party, we're going to disagree on some things, and that is okay. If we didn't disagree on things, we'd be a cult, and that's a problem. We're not a cult, and we don't want to be. So I got up, and I was driving from, speaking of ag, an event in Nevada put on by the Iowa Farmers Union. They hosted the FTC chair to speak about consolidation in ag, right? And so I'd spent this 2.5-hour drive, which for me in our 4th Congressional District is a walk in the park, a 2-hour drive, trust me. I spent 2.5 hours thinking about all this stuff I would say about consolidation in ag and all that from the event I was at earlier. But when I heard this discussion break out about being careful versus platform, it was too juicy for me to avoid. I had to get in the middle of it. So I'll tell you what my argument was then as well. The careful crowd is worried, and again, I'm not saying they're unreasonable. I'm not saying that. I'm not disparaging or disrespecting. Their main argument would be is that we have a lot of folks in the center right that may vote for us if we don't say certain things about our platform or what we believe. And you could make that argument. If I were to pay a DC consultant thousands of dollars, he would tell me to say that and do that. But I don't have any DC consultants. I have spoken to a number of former Steve King voters, a number of folks on the right, because of my stance against the carbon capture pipelines. That has been my foot in the door to Republican households that many Democrats before me have not had the opportunity to get. So I have talked to a lot of Republicans in the district. And a common question at Democratic events in rural Iowa is, why do the Republicans think we're so evil? Why do they hate us so much? And it came up again that night. The first thing that a Steve King voter asks me, and trust me, I'm nothing like Steve King, okay? So just to be clear, the first question they ask me is not, are you progressive or are you moderate? The first question they ask me is, who owns you? Why do they care about that? It's about trust. I would argue that we as Democrats, the party of human rights, the party of standing up for the vilified, the downtrodden, the suffering, the starving, the struggling, it does not take a whole lot for Democrats to become the party of hypocrisy if we're not careful. Randy Feenster's not going around saying he's going to take care of black and brown people. He's not going around saying he's going to take care of the LGBTQ plus community. He's not going around saying he's going to stand up for bodily autonomy for women. There's really no bar there, right? There's no integrity bar there. But we are the party of human rights. We are the party of equity. We are the party that fights for those who need the good fight to be fought on their behalf. It is easier for us to become the party of hypocrites as a result of that worldview, that collective worldview. After I tell Steve King voters, you can go ahead and open up your phone, you can look me up on Open Secrets, you'll see I take literally $0.00 from corporate PACs. And Chris talked about the fact that we have plenty of Democrats that take corporate money, right? They say, wow, don't all politicians take corporate money? Well, I don't. And the conversation continues and it ends usually with a handshake. Now, I will admit, I'm not naive to the fact that by rejecting corporate PAC money, it is going to take me longer to reach as many voters as I wish to reach, right? I don't have the funding to run commercials days on end like a Randy Feenster does. So there are disadvantages to it. But the advantage is I sleep peacefully at night. I don't have a single regret about what I've done. Now, I'm not saying I've done everything right, but if I would like to think that if I've done something I'm not a fan of, I correct it, I fix it, right? But here's the thing. There's this assumption that we have to be careful to win in a red state. And I know some people say it's a purple state. You can maybe make that argument. I think it's a red state right now. I think we need to face reality and fight harder, right? But here's the thing. My argument to you all is that those Steve King voters and votes on the center right even, they're looking for people they can trust. And the moment you're trying to be careful and hide certain things about who you are and what you believe in from them, people have really strong bullshit meters, and they're going to be able to see that pretty quickly. I'm just telling you. So I understand the argument about being careful, but here's the thing. I'll get to your question in just a minute. a Chris Jones, when he comes in here and he says some of the things he says, a lot of DC consultants would have their pants on fire. They'd be in a panic. They'd be like, you can't say that kind of stuff. Chris Jones, you can't say that. A lot of people are saying the things he's saying. The only people that aren't are politicians. We need more politicians that reject corporate PAC money so they can speak the truth that everyone else already knows. So that's my 2 cents on that anyway. The final thing I'll say is this. We have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to connect with those on the right. And it's not just about public education, which is a big one. It's not just about AEAs, which is a big one. It's not just about carbon capture pipelines, but that's a big one, right? It's not just about water quality, but that's a big one. It's not just about our cancer incidence rate, but that's a big one. It's not just about Donald Trump being top of ticket and maybe being a convicted felon by November, but that's a big one. It is hard to find an election cycle for Democrats in a red state and a red district. There's no getting around the fact we are literally in one of the reddest congressional districts in the country. It is hard to think of an election cycle where we have more variables aligning on our side, in our favor. And if you ask a prognosticator from DC if this seat is winnable for a Democrat, they'll say no. They'll say, well, the last time a Democrat won this U.S. House seat in West Iowa was 1982. Hearken, right? The congressional districts, the borders have changed. There's been redistricting, so it's hard to say 4th, 5th, what have you. There's no longer a 5th, but here's what I know. I know that J.D. Scholten just lost by 3% in 2018. Now, yes, he did lose to Steve King, which at that point, no one likes Steve King. I acknowledge that. But here's the thing. People are people and pain is pain. And the Republican Party is facing a situation right now where they cannot beat us on policy. The polling shows that. The fact they're losing on their bread and butter issues in red states shows that. The fact they haven't won the popular vote of a presidential election in 20 years shows that. The fact the red wave didn't happen in 2022 because there was never going to be a red wave, right? They cannot beat us straight up on policy, so what they're doing is they're pushing extremism to drive people like us out of red states where they can, while they can, to consolidate power. The problem with that is they're hurting their own now. They're hurting their own. So my ask, and then I'll be done, is this. We have to challenge ourselves to get out of our comfort zones. We got to start talking to Republicans. We got to start talking to Trump voters. Because I can tell you, they are much more open to a conversation and much more unhappy with a Kim Reynolds, a Randy Feenstra, and even a Donald Trump these days. Donald Trump only got 50% of the vote in the caucuses here. Nikki Haley dropped out months ago, and Nikki Haley's getting 20% in Republican primary. Donald Trump is in trouble, right? The only way that we're going to be able to take advantage of that, though, is actually talking to Republicans and focusing on the issues. Reserve judgment. Be patient. Be respectful. The issues are on our side. Let's focus on those issues and make connections. All right. Question? You're correct. Your mom was very wise. You got it. You got it. I completely agree with you. I would argue that's the way we need to look at it. I was at a birthday party in between my 2 events today. I didn't know this was going to happen, but my 5-year-old had to go to a birthday party at a band shell. And so I had an hour between events, and my wife asked if I could take him. I was like, sure. And there was a guy that works in construction that was sitting at the table. I don't know any of these people, so, but it was fine. And I don't lead with, hey, I'm Ryan Melton, I'm running for Congress, because who wants to hear that? Okay, especially at a birthday party of 5, who wants to hear that? But it came up because I said, we were having a great conversation, and I said, I have to go. I got to go to a thing, this thing. And he said, oh, what thing? What are you doing? And then I felt really awkward because I was like, well, okay, I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm running for Congress. I try not to say that in these settings, but I have to go to a thing. He didn't know what party I was affiliated with. I didn't know what party he was affiliated with. He said, oh, wow, can I talk to you about stuff? I'm like, yeah. He said, I actually want to run for some things. Like, oh, that's great. What do you want to run for? And he talked about some possible options. And I said, what would be your number one plank you'd run on? Again, I didn't know what party he was from. And he didn't know what party I was from. And he said, mental health. And I said, oh, you mean like the mental health system, the fact that we have like 100 beds available for youth that are going through emergency mental health crises in our state, far too little, and kids have to wait for days in ERs until the bed opens up? He said, no, but that's bad too, but not that. What I mean is just the fact that we people on the ground who are struggling every single week to pay our bills, to buy food, when we're busting our asses, and it's been like that since I got out of high school, and it seems like we're falling further and further behind. That takes a massive mental toll, and we are struggling. And this has been going on as long as I remember, and he's probably in his 40s now. And we talked an awful lot about the root causes of that. We talked for about 20 minutes about this kind of stuff. After he found out I was running for Congress, I didn't tell him who I was or what party I was affiliated with. We talked for 20 minutes about these bread and butter things until he asked me what party I was affiliated with. And the entire time I was like, he could very well be a Republican, but thankfully I've talked to a lot of them. It doesn't matter. People are people. Pain is pain. So he asked, what party are you affiliated with, by the way? And I was like, whew, moment of truth. Because in our congressional district, they're often going to be a Republican, okay? I'm a Democrat, but I said it proudly, and he said, oh gosh, yeah, I hate what Republicans are doing right now. Thank God for that. But here's the thing. We didn't even have to talk party affiliation. We just talked about issues. We talked about pain. We talked about goals. We talked about our kids. We talked about what suffering looks like for the average person working 40 hours a week, and they still can't make enough money to pay the bills and pay the rent. Issues, 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 issues. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Drive safely. Thanks for coming out.